Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make your own Easter Bunny door hanger. Now this particular Easter Bunny was made out of a scrap piece of 2x8 that I had laying around the garage. It's a very simple do-it-yourself project. Just need a couple of basic power tools. It can be self-standing or it can be made, as I made it, to hang on the front door as a decoration. You can also make them in a variety of different sizes. So we're going to start with a scrap piece of wood, and I basically drew an Easter Bunny on it. I'll put a link on the website on how to sketch these things. You can either copy it or you can just freehand it. Once you have the sketch on the wood, I just used the jigsaw to cut it out. Certainly, again, you could use a bandsaw or a pin saw if you had it. Jigsaw, I find, is just very easy for these type of projects. And it doesn't take long to cut out the outline of the Easter Bunny. Now, once the outline is cut out, I'm actually going to use a router, and it doesn't really matter what size bit you use. You're going to want to create a couple of different levels on this Easter Bunny. The first thing I'm doing now is just carving down a portion of that flopped over ear. You can see a close-up here. So I've gone down maybe a 1/4 inch or so. And that's just to give it, some 3-dimension to it. I'm also going to use the router to carve down the entire right side ear. Basically the ears, you want the head or the face to stand out from the ears. And I'm going to use that same router to router across the bottom of the head, just break down the neck, and then also in between the two front legs. Again, I'm just creating a little bit of depth, and we're going to go back with a disc grinder and make all of these transitions a little bit smoother, but this gives you the basic depth. Now I set the router a little bit shallower, and I went over the pores, broke down the pores or cut out the pores with the router. So basically, that cut across the top of the pores is a little bit shallower than the other first cut that I did. You can see it on that close-up. And now I'm going to move to a disc grinder. Now, I'm using a flap sanding wheel. This one in particular is a 36 grit, and it's new, so it's very, very aggressive. You have to be careful. This thing moves a lot of wood very quickly. I'm basically going to round over all of the edges around the whole perimeter of the rabbit, and I'm also going to smooth over any of the areas, make those transitions a little bit softer, and I'm going to kind of merge the level, for the example, of the chest into the depth of the neck that we cut out with the router. I'm going to do the same thing with the ears. I'm going to round over the outside cut marks from the jigsaw, and I'm going to also round over the corners and the edges and just kind of smooth out everything. Be real careful with the disc grinder. With a 36 grit, it can remove a lot of flesh very quickly also. It doesn't take long to get the wood sanded down and smoothed out as much as you want it. The next step is going to be to move over to a oscillating sander. Now I'm just using an 80 grit paper. And basically, you probably could have done the whole thing with an oscillating sander. You probably could have gotten away from the disc grinder. It might have taken you just a little bit longer. But I did, with an 80 grit paper, I sanded everything smooth, rounded over all of the corners, and then I did go back over it with a 220. The 220 is a very quick pass, just to smooth out any of the hard lines from the 80. And now I'm going to add a little bit of detail onto the face of the rabbit. I'm going to use a Dremel grinder with a little wood cutting tool, and I'm just going to basically carve out the nose, and I'm going to carve out the buck teeth on the rabbit. So really what I'm doing is I'm just removing a little bit of the wood surrounding the nose and surrounding the buck teeth. And then I'm going to go back to that oscillating sander and kind of smooth the transition or all those rough marks from the Dremel, and try to keep the buck teeth and the nose at a higher level than the surrounding wood. Very simple process. You don't have to be real careful. You just want it to be a little bit higher. Now for the eyes, all I'm really going to do is drill 2 holes. I believe it was a 1/4 inch diameter drill. I just drilled very slowly so that I didn't go all the way through the wood. You really only want to drill about halfway through. And if there's rough edges from the drilled holes, you can run back over it with the sander real quick. At this point, I'm just going to make the lines a little bit darker, for the nose and the mouth and the teeth and the eyebrows, and then I'm going to highlight all of those lines. I also added some whiskers for the rabbit. I'm going to go back to the Dremel grinder, but this time I'm going to use a cutoff wheel. These are great for making straight lines, and all we're really going to do is just make each one of those facial characteristics a little bit more distinct. So I'm going to outline the teeth. I'm going to actually cut a line for the mouth, just pivot it right along that mouth line. I can do plunge cuts with this cutoff wheel. I can do straight lines, and it will do a curved line very nicely also. I'm going to do curved lines for the whiskers, and again I'm just kind of pivoting it on one palm of one hand so that all the whiskers come into the same point. And really all I'm doing is just kind of drawing lines with the Dremel grinder. I do the eyebrows, and almost done with the detail on this project already. It's a very, very easy do-it-yourself project. While I had this cutoff wheel on, I did add just a little bit of additional texture to the inside of the right ear, and also a little bit on the inside of the left ear, below the fold over. You can see the details there. Now, I could have been finished at that point, but when I looked at it, it just looked a little bit plain to me, a little bit too smooth, and I decided to just go back to the disc grinder and just add a little bit of texture around the outside diameter of the face. Just, little marks with the disc grinder, just to kind of simulate that this is really a furry little critter. Just a bunch of indentations. You certainly could have done the same thing with the Dremel grinder. And then I liked the way that it came out so much on the face that I ended up doing those same type of little marks all the way around the whole outside perimeter of this rabbit. While I had the disc grinder out, I also removed all the old paint and stain marks from this scrap piece of wood. Apparently I had used it in the shop for quite a while to rest projects on while I painted or stained them. And the disc grinder, especially with the 36 grit flap sanding wheel, takes that old paint off very, very quickly. The last step in this process, or in this project, is to either stain or paint the Easter Bunny. I just decided to use some stain. I used kind of a grayish stain, basically because that's what I had. I didn't go out and buy anything. And then I'll wipe off a good portion of that. I'll let it sit for a little bit, and then I'll wipe off a good portion of it so that some of the wood shows through. And this is the finished product. A nice little wooden Easter Bunny that can be made to be either self-standing or to be hung on a door as a door hanging decoration. A very easy, do-it-yourself woodworking project. Please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com, and please like or subscribe to this YouTube channel.